Thing's not happy. Ooh, yeah. Ooh. Look at that one-way clutch. Jeez, it's melted. No bueno. Hello everybody, welcome back to Non-Off Projects. Today we're going to be tearing into the 46 RH from the 97 Dodge conversion van project. If you haven't already seen it, last time we pulled the transmission out of the van. You should go check it out. There were some mishaps. But let's get straight into the teardown. We're going to start by just removing everything external from the transmission, and then we'll split the case. So the only specialty tool that's required for the disassembly and reassembly of this transmission is a good shop press. The overdrive unit is held in with a very strong spring that you're not going to be able to safely disassemble or reassemble without one. So if you're looking to also rebuild your 46 RE or RH, then you're going to need one. Additionally, if you're also looking to rebuild your 46 RH or RE, I highly recommend that in addition to this video, you check out the YouTube channel Transmission Bench. The guy who runs it does really excellent explanation videos on a few different transmission models, including this one. So we're going to go ahead and get started by removing the throttle valve linkage along with the shift selection lever. We're also going to remove all the sensors on the transmission case to get started. Now when you're doing a transmission rebuild, the biggest thing is staying organized. You just want to make sure you have a big enough workspace to lay out all your different assemblies. Now if you didn't watch the previous videos, the symptoms of the failure on this transmission was that it would only go forward in the low gear selection. Drive and second would not work. Reverse still worked alright, but this thing was towed with the rear wheels down for a long distance without the drive shaft connected. So we're going to see what kind of failure we have going on inside. Once you have this bolt and nut loose, you just need to prise the linkage up. Keep the spring in there so you know where it goes, and then place it in a box. This transmission is pretty filthy. It looks like it was leaking some oil in this area. You see we have another retaining bolt over here. You see you do kind of have to work it back and forth. We're going to set that aside in our box. Next we're going to go ahead and remove all the sensors. I'm using a deep 1-inch socket to remove this sensor. We're going to set that aside in our box. Now the reason I didn't clean this up at all really before disassembly is that I don't want to spray any high pressure water into any of the sensors. That's a good way to ruin them. Once we have it all disassembled, we're going to give the case a really good clean. So now we're going to remove the speed sensor. That was retained by a 1/2-inch bolt. So now we're going to set the bolt with the retainer and the speed sensor into our small parts box. Next we have a sensor down here. I still have the cross member attached just because it's a little too heavy for me to turn it around and take it off once I remove the overdrive assembly from the actual transmission case. But you can see down here there's another sensor we're going to remove. You can see this is actually a Hall effect sensor, I believe, for speed sensing. And you can see the magnet on the end has accumulated some metal debris. Not a great sign. Next, we're going to go ahead and separate the overdrive section of the transmission from the case. They're held on by 7/16 bolts. You can see up top there's these wire harness connections, so we'll just need to keep that in mind for reassembly. Around the perimeter of the case. So we now should be able to separate the overdrive section from the main case. I'm going to get a small screwdriver so we can pry on the case a little bit. I'm going to grab something to prop up the transmission pan just a little bit so it's easier to lift this up and out. Just got a little sliver of wood. I'm going to stick it under the transmission pan. Gonna give it a little bit more of a pry. Gotta pry a little bit more than you think. I grab a little bit of a bigger pry bar. Now, even though I have this large pry bar, I'm only gently using it to pry. It's on there pretty good. Let's give it some more gentle pries. There we are. You can see this one was stuck on there pretty good, but it came off. And you want to avoid twisting because you can see there's this tube that lies in here. So let's set our overdrive section over here. Alright, next I'm going to remove the overdrive apply piston. And we're going to set that aside. Now back over here at the overdrive section, we're going to take the spacer off, place it onto our overdrive piston. There's also this bearing. May need to grab a pick to help it come off. Yep, I'm gonna go grab a pick. So now we're just gently going to pull the bearing off. We're gonna give it a feel. Doesn't feel that bad. So now we're going to place it on our overdrive apply piston. Okay, I think before we get much farther, I'm going to go ahead, put this up on end so that we can remove the cross member from the overdrive section. Ow. Just about gave myself a hernia. Wow. I think we're going to go ahead and just remove the transmission mount directly from the overdrive section. Likely would have been easiest to remove that while it was still in the car, but not a huge deal. Doing it now. Set that aside. Now we can get back to the overdrive section. So I'm going to remove this snap ring. You can see on this transmission you have a backing plate, some frictions. These look fairly burnt. There's a little bit of heat witnessing on the steels, but it's really not horrible. Obviously they're going to be replaced. We'll probably get a whole new steel set too. I'm going to set the snap ring on top of the frictions and steels for the overdrive. Set it aside. I'm going to remove the next snap ring. Looks like another snap ring. And this is really common on these. You can see this snap ring actually broke, which is interesting because I'm not sure where the rest of that snap ring is. Next, we're going to need to use a Torx bit to remove the snap ring cover over here. Looks like it's a T25. You can see there's a gasket on the cover. I'm going to set the bolts back in. Put it in our parts box. You can see with the cover off, there's a snap ring in there. So we're going to grab our snap ring pliers, use them to spread the snap ring. I'm not sure if these snap ring pliers actually spread wide enough, so I may need to get a little creative. There we go. You can see it took a little bit of finagling, so my snap rings didn't spread wide enough. So what I did is grabbed 2 screwdrivers, or a screwdriver and a pry bar. I held one end of the snap ring as far towards me as I could. Used the other one to spread it there with my finger in between as a pivot point. I squeezed the top. And as I was doing it, I pulled the whole assembly out of the Overdrive case. So there's a little trick for you guys if you don't have a larger snap ring like me. So now we're going to go ahead, pull the whole output assembly out. Feel the bearing. It doesn't feel bad overall. There should also be a bearing inside the case, way down in there. I'm gonna give that a feel. I don't feel any chattering or anything, so for now we're gonna leave that alone. So we can now set the Overdrive case aside. So this is one of the assemblies you're gonna need a shop press for. You look on the underside. Under this sun gear, there's a really big spring. And what you have to do is press this down far enough that you can get to the snap ring that holds it on. Now there's no real way to do it without a press. I have one, so I'm going to bring it over to the press, get it set up. So here we have the Overdrive drum set up in the press. You can see I had to fabricate a little bit of a pressing tool, I guess you could say, in order to fit around the sun gear. The only real requirements for this tool for me was that I didn't have to go to the store because I really didn't want to leave. So I just took some old head bolts I had, ground the heads down so they'd fit into the sun gear grooves, and then I threaded on some nuts and drilled holes in this plate, this scrap plate, so that it can be pressed on. Lots of guys will use either steel or thick PVC pipe that'll fit around here and cut an access window so they can access the snap ring. This is just what I had. I didn't have any pipe that was the correct diameter. It's either way too big or way too small. So I'm going to give this a try. It's always a good idea to wear a face shield around this kind of stuff. Anything under high spring pressure can seriously mess you up, blind you, maim you, whatever. So with that being said, let's give this a try. Alright, so I'm going to make sure the press should be sitting on the roller bearing. I'm going to make sure it's as centered up as I can get it. And we'll start pumping away. So you just want to pump it up enough that you're taking the tension off this outer snap ring. So I'm going to look for where it ends, which is right here. I'm going to grab a pick and try to pick it out. So here's the snap ring. I'm going to set it aside. Next we're going to pump it up just a little bit more to expose the inner snap ring. This is the snap ring. I'm going to pick it out just like I did the other one. There we go, we have both snap rings removed. Now we're going to slowly release the pressure on the drum. There, that wasn't too bad now, was it? Looks like one of these bolts got a little wedged in here. There we go. Now I'm going to set this tool aside because we're going to need it for reassembly. But let's take this back over to the bench and get this fully disassembled. Alright, so we're back on the bench. And I think, if you remember, when we took out the first set of frictions and steels, we found this part broken snap ring. I believe it goes to the Overdrive drum. Now this is a common snap ring that breaks. You always want to replace it. and this is already broken. So I guess it's a good thing we were in here. So we're gonna set that aside. All right, let's go ahead and disassemble the drum. So you have your backing plate. These frictions don't look too terrible. There is metal on them, but they don't look horribly burnt. So we're gonna set these in a stack. Next we're gonna remove all of these. Here's the sun gear. Give it a quick once over. Everything looks to be in order. We're gonna set it with the frictions and steels. Here's that spring that was under tension. Nothing too concerning here, no broken teeth or anything from what I can see. Next we'll remove this thrust bearing. Feels normal. And here's the gear set. I potentially see a little bit of wear on them. I don't know if it's a normal machining mark or not. I'm not sure how well it's shown up on camera. But there's some grooving on the edges. You can see there's some metal here. Potentially these are okay. Potentially we'll need to replace them. They need a closer inspection. Finally, I forgot to start the camera, but what we're going to do next is use our snap ring pliers to grasp the inner race of the roller and pull it out like this. You can see there's some metal chunks on here. Here's the roller clutch itself, and there's a missing roller. That may have just come out during removal. The rest actually look decent. So we'll set it back into place and look for that missing roller. Here it is. I think it just fell out during disassembly. Goes in like that. There's another thrust bearing here. This one feels a little chattery. You can hear that noise. There's also metal on the outside. Okay, I think we're going to remove the snap ring here, fully disassemble this thing. Use a pick. Okay, the second snap ring sits in this groove here. We're going to need a stronger pick. Insert that with the other snap ring. And there's one more snap ring that sits down in this groove here. Right there. You're gonna find the brake. Now it's fully apart. I'm gonna set these as we disassembled them, just so we can keep track. And with that, the overdrive unit is fully disassembled. Right. Now that the overdrive unit is disassembled, we're going to turn our attention to the main case. We're going to start by taking out the valve body. That's awesome. Get you guys back up here. So, like I was saying, we're going to start by taking out the valve body. But to do that, we obviously have to take off the pan. The pan is held on by 1/2-inch bolts. With that, we have our pan removed. You can see there's actually a magnet here. It's got a fair amount of friction material on it. We're going to set the pan aside. Next, we're going to pop off the valve body. It's held on by these 7/16 bolts. And with that, our valve body should be free. I set those bolts in the oil pan. Looks like we do need to give a tap on the wiring harness entry point. This right here is the wiring harness I'm talking about. Just light taps. Should be free now. Here's our valve body. See, there's a fair amount of metal. Looks like it got pumped through. So we're going to need to disassemble this and clean it out. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and set it in the oil pan. Now that we've got the valve body out of the way, let's remove this accumulator spring, piston, and we have another spring down in here. Set these with the rest of the parts. Next, we're going to remove the band adjuster right here. I'm gonna go grab a wrench for that. Looks like the band adjustment lock nut right here is a 3/4. That lock nut seems to be really on there, so I'm going to try giving it a go with the socket. Somebody really torqued that down. Now that it's loosened up, you can use a wrench, or in this case it's loose enough that I can just turn it on out. I'm going to go ahead and remove it, place it in the box. Next we'll go ahead and remove both these rods, connecting the band to the piston and the adjuster. Place that in the box. Next I'm going to go ahead and remove the pump bolts. Looks like these are a 1/2 inch. Looks like this is a date code, probably from when this transmission was remanufactured. I think that says 05, so that'd be 2005. Could be reading it wrong though. With all the pump bolts out, next we're going to remove the pump. We're going to have to use a pry bar here. Pry just like this. And with that, we can pull out our pump. You see we have our spacer here, along with all the seals on there. I see some metal buildup, friction plate buildup in the pump. I'll set that aside. Okay, with the pump out, let's grab the gasket. Set it on the pump. Take the forward and direct drums out. And on the back side, in here, you see there's this little thrust washer. Use a pick to get it out. And then inside the case, there's a race over here. Oop, that's what you don't want to do. We have to tip this up a little bit so we can get it out. I'm going to set the forward and direct drums over on the bench. Also take this band out. You can see there's some unhappiness on this band. Nothing horrible though. It's a little bit burnt. Here's the race. So I'm going to set that with this thrust washer in the box. Okay, next we have to take out this snap ring holding on the forward gear set. There we go. Put that in the box. Now we should be able to remove forward gears. You can see the outer ring gear. Then the planetary gears. Ooh, man. Okay, here's our unhappiness. Found it. Man, that's messed up. Yeah, look at this. Very unhappy. We're gonna need a new one of these. You can see inside there's this thrust washer. It's also burned up. So this is probably no good. We'll have to replace it. But for now, we're going to set it on the bench. Next, we have this spacer. See, it's burnt up too. This doesn't look too bad. I'm going to set this on top of the forward gear set. And you can see on the back here, we have another thrust washer along with the spacer, which doesn't want to come off, but it's right here. Okay, next we need to remove this planetary gear. Looks pretty chewed up as well. Not nearly as bad. Set this on top of the sun gear. Then we'll take out this ring gear. Looks like we got a spacer. I'm going to set this on top of the planetary gear carrier. Got a snap ring holding in the reverse drum. So we'll get our snap ring pliers. Seems like there's some unhappiness in here. Here's our snap ring. Yeah, looks like this is melted. I'll have to show you guys once I get it out. I'm gonna grab some needle nose pliers and see if I can pull it out. See how messed up this little plastic spacer is. It's all melted. I'm gonna set that on top of that planetary gear set we just took out. Okay, cut that out. Start now. Alright, so now we need to rotate our reverse drum. Remove it. reverse drum does not want to come out. So it looks like it's getting hung up on the snap ring groove. Almost like there's a ridge or something. You guys are probably yelling at me. Probably missing something stupid. But maybe not. Alright, after lots of prying and messing around with close. There we go. Man, that was really on there. My understanding is that is not normal. And yes, that is the case. I can show you now. And we may be done for. I'm not... You can see. Look at that. This is supposed to come out. But because it got so hot, it did not want to come out. So it decided to just break. Yeah. Ouch. Wow. This thing is not happy. Ooh, yeah. Ooh. Look at that one-way clutch. Jeez, it's melted. No bueno. Alright, well, we are going to forge on. Next, we're going to pop out the reverse band. We're going to press inwards, use a pick. To remove that strut. Out comes the band. So that's the piece I was prying out. Set the band around the reverse drum. Next, we should be able to remove the shaft, although I don't think it's any good. Let me show you guys what I can see. You can see there. This case may be no good. We might be miles ahead by just getting the junkyard unit. But let's remove the shaft. I'm gonna grab a 2x4 and pound it out. Alright, since the intermediate shaft is stuck in the overdrive piston housing, we're just gonna go ahead and pop out these bolts that hold it in. Alright, these bolts are 3/8. Ooh, man. So this got very hot, no lubrication, as you'd expect with it being towed with the rear wheels down. I doubt this intermediate shaft is any good, and this overdrive piston housing is certainly no good. Set that aside. Now the only thing left in the case are the pistons. The kick down apply piston and the reverse apply piston. Okay, now that we've got everything removed from the main case, we're going to go ahead and take out the reverse apply lever. I'm just going to tap it out with the screwdriver. Gonna reassemble it just so I know how it goes. Next, I'll take out the apply piston. The spring in this is really light. Just use a screwdriver. we go. Lots of metal chunks in there. Looks like the actual bore is in decent shape though. Looks like that stuff just got pumped in. Likely it's originally from the planetary gears that we saw, which got super chewed up. Okay, the last thing in the case is getting out the kick down piston. Probably the easiest way is to get some kind of clamp that'll compress it for you. I'm going to try doing it just by hand, but that may not work out. That'll work. You can see I'm just using a standard woodworking clamp with a socket to extend the throat capacity. There we are. Just release the pressure. See, it's got a sealing ring, kind of like a piston ring. Whoa! See, it definitely still seals. There it comes. Same kind of setup here. I'm gonna take a look in the bore now. Doesn't look bad. Now that we've got everything removed from the two case halves, I'm going to give everything a very thorough visual inspection. We already know there's going to be some stuff that needs replaced. Obviously we're going to need a new overdrive piston housing. We also found some unhappy planetaries. But now I'm going to go through, feel every thrust bearing, check over each planetary individually, and just check for anything that feels weird. So obviously we know that the intermediate shaft has been overheated and the overdrive piston housing slash intermediate shaft support is going to need cut off. I don't know if the intermediate shaft is going to be any good. We'll find out once we get the overdrive housing off. I'm going to make sure the sun gear teeth are all there, not chipped. These actually look okay. Next we have this planetary. I think this rough look is actually just from the casting process, but you want to feel each one of the gears individually. There should be some up and down play, but you shouldn't be able to move it in and out or rock it or anything like that. And if you see, there's actually a rough surface finish on the edge of the teeth. I'm pretty sure that's normal from what I can see. I'm going to check each one of the gears individually. Don't feel anything that stands out too much. A little bit of witness marks here on this surface, but I can't feel anything. So this may actually be reusable. I do actually see some minor pitting in this sun gear. You can see in the center of the tooth, hopefully it shows up on camera, there's pits on some of these teeth. So I'll have to look into maybe getting a new one of those. We'll see how expensive this all is. This thrush washer has obviously been overheated. Check this ring gear. You see there's a fair amount of aluminum that's been deposited onto it. But I think the steel teeth themselves are actually okay. I'll need to give it a closer look after cleaning, but this ring gear may be reusable. Next we have this planetary gear, which is very unhappy, certainly not reusable. See the roller bearings have failed in this gear, the teeth are chewed up, and the housing is distorted. So we may need to be replacing the gear train and the drive shell. Next, let's look at the Overdrive planetary. You want to inspect every thrust washer, thrust bearing that is. Make sure it turns completely freely. I feel a little bit of chattering, so I'll probably get a new set of these if we end up rebuilding this. You also want to inspect the roller clutch and the roller clutch race. Which actually looks to be in okay condition. Then we have the Overdrive planetary. See there's metal in the oil that's on it. That movement is normal. This planetary actually feels okay. We'll give it a closer inspection after it's cleaned. Next, let's look at the Overdrive output shaft. I'm going to feel this bearing. Should be really smooth. You can hear this bearing is chattery. I can feel some chattering, and you can also hear it. So it's best to replace that. You're going to look at the snap rings, make sure everything looks good there. There's also a number of these brass bushings that need inspected. I'm going to check the ring gear teeth. These look okay. Obviously, you'll also want to closely inspect all the steels and frictions. These plates, the thick plates, need to be flat. The frictions should not look like this. They should be lighter in color. These are burnt. In the steels, if you see heat witnessing, if they've changed color, or if it's darker in certain spots, then they likely need replaced. And again, you want to give special attention to all of the thrust bearings. This one feels a little chattery. Here's what frictions are supposed to look like. Maybe a little bright to see. You can see the comparison. Also going to look at the forward and direct drum and the kickdown band. You can see there's some slight burning on this. I'm always going to replace this. And there's also some chunks taken out of the friction material. There's a snap ring that holds the frictions and steels in within this drum. You can see there's also a plastic thrust washer. These frictions don't look bad, and neither do the steels. You can see there's an apply piston within here. And you can see on the rear of this backing plate, there's a lot of friction material / metal buildup. There's also an additional set of frictions and steels within here that you'll want to inspect. You also want to inspect the reverse drum. This reverse band actually looks okay. No burning, no chipping, so this could be reused. One thing I forgot to mention on the forward drum, you need to inspect these surfaces for any kind of pitting or wear. If it's pitted or worn, it should be replaced. This drum may need replaced just based on the fact that this snout is seized in here. The pump is also another area you want to inspect. If you've had metal run through the transmission like I have, you'll want to pop off the pump cover and inspect the rotor. Make sure it's clean. You can get a remanufactured pump unit fairly cheap, and that may be worth doing depending on what we find inside. So now that we've got an idea of what we're working with, I'm going to go ahead and make a list of everything that needs replaced. I'm going to tally up the costs and see what we're working with, and then we can decide what we're going to do from there.